This wasn't just a company. It was something far bigger. At its height, it grew so wealthy, so powerful, that it was worth more than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google combined. And it didn't stop at trading goods. It raised private armies, armed them with guns and cannons, and sent them across oceans to conquer entire territories. It enslaved nations, massacred populations, destroyed entire cultures, all in the name of profit. For nearly 2 centuries, it controlled the world's trade routes. It set the price of spices that Europe craved, and in doing so, became the richest corporation the world had ever seen. But like every empire built on greed and blood, it eventually collapsed into nothing. This is the story of the Dutch East India Company, the richest, most corrupt corporation in history, and the warning it left behind for every trillion-dollar company today. The year is 1602. Amsterdam is booming, a city alive with ambition, overflowing with money. On the docks, merchants shout deals over the creaking of ships and the sharp snap of ropes. Sailors haul crates packed with pepper, cloves, and nutmeg, spices so valuable that people said they were worth more than gold. But with so much wealth at stake, chaos ruled. Rival Dutch traders undercut each other, prices crashed, fortunes vanished overnight. The government knew this couldn't continue, so they created something the world had never seen before. They merged all the rival trading groups into one colossal monopoly, the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie. History would remember it simply as the VOC. This wasn't just another business. For the first time ever, ordinary citizens, widows, merchants, even carpenters could buy shares and own a piece of the company. It was the birth of the modern corporation. The Dutch East India Company was the beginning of it all. Every stock exchange in the world today, from Wall Street to NASDAQ, can trace its roots back to this company. The first voyages were rough, brutal, unforgiving. Ships ran straight into violent storms that tore their masts apart. Waves the size of houses smashed across their decks. Men clung to ropes, praying the sea would spare them. Pirates waited on the horizon, ready to attack. Sailors went hungry, sometimes eating rats just to survive. Many died from scurvy before ever making it home. For a lot of crews, the ocean wasn't a path to fortune. It was a floating graveyard. But when the survivors finally limped home, their holds overflowing with spices, the rewards were staggering. Nutmeg bought for pennies in Asia, sold for hundreds of times its value in Europe. Some voyages delivered profits of 400, even 500%. Investors celebrated like never before. Dividends poured in. Some people doubled their fortunes in just a single year. The VOC was no longer just a trading company. It had become one of the most powerful forces on Earth, and it was only just beginning. The VOC didn't just trade goods. It started acting like a government. Along its routes, it built massive fortresses, and it raised private armies to defend them. Treaties were signed only when force was on its side. It even minted its own coins, ran its own courts, and carried out executions. It colonized entire nations in the pursuit of profit. By the mid-1600s, the company dominated the Indian Ocean, a fleet in the hundreds, a workforce tens of thousands, and it worked. The VOC became the beating heart of the Dutch Golden Age. Amsterdam exploded with wealth. Canals glittered with new mansions. Markets overflowed with luxuries, silk, porcelain, tea, spices. Owning VOC shares was like printing money, and soon the world witnessed its first stock market bubble. Everyone wanted in. At its peak, the Dutch East India Company was worth the equivalent of more than $8 trillion in today's money. That's not just more than Apple, not just more than Amazon. It was bigger than Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google combined. No corporation in history has ever come close. The wealth it generated was staggering. Annual dividends of 30, 40, sometimes even 50% weren't unusual. An investment of 100 guilders could return half that amount in a single year. Ordinary Dutch citizens, shopkeepers, carpenters, even widows found themselves transformed into a wealthy elite simply by owning shares in the company. And the impact on Amsterdam was unmistakable. The city blossomed into the financial capital of the world. Merchants built elegant homes along the canals. Markets brimmed with silks from China, porcelain from Japan, and spices from Indonesia. Coffee, tea, and tobacco became luxuries that soon found their way into everyday life. This was the Dutch Golden Age. The company's success even transformed finance itself. At the Amsterdam Exchange, traders pioneered new tools, futures contracts, bonds, even short selling, turning the marketplace into a kind of theater where fortunes were made and lost on every voyage. For a moment in history, it seemed as if the VOC's wealth had no limits. The VOC's wealth dazzled Amsterdam, but behind that glitter was a system built on violence and fear. While investors at home celebrated record dividends, the company enforced its monopoly with ruthless force overseas. In 1621, Governor-General Jan Pieterszoon Cohen led VOC troops into the Banda Islands with one goal: absolute control of the nutmeg trade. Over 14,000 people, men, women, and children, were massacred. Villages burned, survivors enslaved, those left alive forced to labor on plantations run by the company. One of the most profitable spices in Europe was secured through terror and mass death. Back in Amsterdam, executives enjoyed the rewards. They hosted extravagant banquets, drank from silver goblets, commissioned paintings from masters whose names still fill museums today. Their homes glittered with wealth. Their influence reached deep into Dutch politics, shaping decisions at the highest level. Life for ordinary sailors could not have been more different. On VOC ships, men were crammed into filthy quarters where disease spread fast: scurvy, dysentery, starvation. Thousands died before ever seeing land again. Many never made it back to port, their deaths reduced to numbers in company ledgers, under the cost of doing business. Corruption infected the company from top to bottom. Governors in Asia padded their fortunes through bribes and smuggling, often earning dozens of times more than their official salaries. Shareholders weren't ignorant, but as long as the money kept flowing, they chose not to ask questions. The VOC wasn't only the richest corporation in history, it was also one of the most ruthless, extracting unimaginable wealth at the cost of entire communities abroad, countless lives at sea, and a culture of corruption that stretched from distant outposts to the heart of Amsterdam itself. The VOC was never unchallenged. Other European powers wanted the same wealth, and none more fiercely than the British East India Company. Both companies had royal backing, both commanded fleets and armies, and both were determined to control the same trade routes. What followed wasn't competition in boardrooms or negotiations in courts. It was open warfare on the seas and across colonial outposts. Ships exchanged cannon fire, forts reduced to rubble, ports changed hands again and again. It was one of the world's first corporate wars. For a time, the VOC emerged stronger, expanding its influence across Asia. But every victory came at a price: maintaining fleets, paying soldiers, sustaining long campaigns, drained its resources. The profits that once flowed so easily began to vanish, swallowed by the enormous costs of war. By the 1700s, the VOC was no longer the unstoppable giant it had once been. The endless wars that had fueled its rise were now draining its treasury. The monopoly that once guaranteed enormous profits was breaking apart. As other European powers pushed into Asia, corruption at every level made things worse, turning the company into a machine that served its governors and shareholders long after it stopped serving the Dutch people. Investors began to lose faith. Dividends shrank. Confidence collapsed. What had once been a symbol of national pride started to look more like a burden. In the end, the Dutch government decided it had no choice but to take over. In 1799, after nearly 2 centuries, the Dutch East India Company was dissolved. Its debts and broken assets were absorbed by the state, and with that, the richest corporation in history vanished, from unimaginable wealth to nothing.